is CNN.
Just moments away from a news conference at a hospital here in Washington where we hope to learn more about the condition of Vice President Dick Cheney. Now to Moneyline, I'm Judy Woodruff in Washington. Tonight, the Vice President with a history of heart trouble checked into the hospital. We'll have a live report.
A winter blast hits the Northeast with a vengeance. We'll look at how bad weather is bad for the economy. It wasn't bad for Wall Street, today at least. Stocks jump across the board.
And tragedy outside San Diego.
All of a sudden you hear everyone screaming, run, and everyone's just hurling every which way.
The very latest on a deadly school shooting.
This is Moneyline.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Moneyline. Our top story tonight, the Vice President hospitalized. Dick Cheney, who's been playing a crucial role in the early days of the Bush presidency, checked himself into the hospital first thing this morning. We are awaiting a news conference detailing the Vice President's condition from the George Washington University Hospital. That's where he is going to be holding that news conference shortly, or the doctors who have been treating him. Let's go to Major Garrett at the White House for a reaction to this. Major?
Stuart, the White House released a statement this afternoon describing exactly why the Vice President went to George Washington University Medical Center. A statement released by his counselor, Mary Madeline, said that the Vice President checked himself in for a cardiac catheterization procedure after experiencing what the White House describes as two brief, mild episodes of chest discomfort. White House describing it as a non-emergency precautionary situation. Now, it's important to point out that the Vice President alerted President Bush about this chest discomfort earlier today, telling the President he was undergoing or having some discomfort and going to have it checked out. No word from the White House in the intervening hours of the Vice President's intentions of having that heart discomfort checked out. The President, later on in the day, was at an East Room ceremony to acknowledge the national championship victories of two Oklahoma University athletic teams. After that ceremony was concluded, he was asked by reporters about the situation with the Vice President.
Vice President is taken to the hospital. Yes. We've been hearing reports that the Vice President's in the hospital. Can you confirm that?
Precautionary measures.
Precautionary?
What's the ailment, sir?
Now, what you may have heard the President say there is precautionary measures, keeping in line with the White House message about this situation. As we have learned here at CNN, the Vice President has just finished or is about to have finished that cardiac catheterization. We're waiting for the results of that to be reported at that press conference at George Washington University Hospital. And as you pointed out, Stuart, very important to this White House, news about the Vice President's condition, not only because he's an important figure in all of national politics, but he's a very important figure for this White House. Vice President Cheney is the point man for President Bush on Capitol Hill in all matters legislative, and he's also been recently put in charge of his energy management team. The Bush White House very sensitive to the upcoming problems with the energy situation, both in shortages and higher prices, and the President tabbed his Vice President Cheney to be in charge of all efforts here at the White House to deal with that situation. He is the point man with several cabinet secretaries dealing with the energy situation. So when it comes to matters on Capitol Hill of importance to this White House and external matters, the Vice President is often the person President Bush turns to first. Stuart?
And that is Major Garrett reporting from the White House. Thank you, Major. Now, as we told you, we are awaiting that press conference detailing the Vice President's condition from the George Washington University Medical Center. We will go to that press conference as soon as it begins. Willow?
Stuart, that news on the Vice President broke about 5 minutes before the markets closed on Wall Street. It had little impact on what turned out to be a day of recovery for tech stocks, which kicked off the week on a solid note. The tech rebound helped to lift the Dow, which rose nearly 96 points to 10,562, but volume was light at 93 million shares, under 1 billion for the first time this year. An even better showing in percentage terms for the NASDAQ, which gained 25 points to 2142. 1.5 billion shares changed hands there. In the broader market, the S&P 500 edged up 7 points to 1241. Terry Keenan followed all the action, and she has more from the New York Stock Exchange. Terry?
Well, Willow, word that the Vice President was back in the hospital did hit here just a few minutes before the closing bell. Traders did have some time to react, and they did gather around their computer screens, but there was no impact on prices or the market averages. Instead, most of the focus here was on the winter snowstorm in the Northeast and the impact on trading volume. It was the slowest day since the day after Christmas. That said, the tone of the session was positive throughout the day. Morgan Stanley, Dean Witter, and Merrill Lynch, two of the most bearish firms on the street, coming out with positive comments on U.S. stocks this morning. In addition, the semiconductor stocks lent some support to technology. Here are some of the big board movers. Cypress rallying 27 cents despite a warning on earnings and revenue. That is considered a very positive sign and helped out that group. AT&T also strong among the Dow 30. Friday's court ruling easing restrictions on cable operators lifting that group. AOL Time Warner getting a pop from that as well. To the downside, Coca-Cola, its president and chief operating officer stepping down, and the New York Times also lower. Let's go back to Stuart Varney now for some breaking news.
All right, thank you very much, Terry. We're going to take you now to the George Washington University Medical Center, where a press conference is now in effect.
George Washington University. I'd like to introduce the physicians who will be answering your questions. On my immediate left is Dr. Jonathan Reiner.
We apparently have lost the signal there momentarily, we believe. We will go back to it as soon as possible. As you may know, earlier today, Vice President Dick Cheney checked himself into the hospital with chest pains. We are back now to that press conference. Let's go there now.
And Dr. Gary Malikoff, who has been taking care of Mr. Cheney for a long time. Dr. Wasserman is going to make a very brief statement, and then we will be available for questions.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Vice President Cheney came to the George Washington University Medical Center at approximately 3:30 this afternoon after 2 brief episodes of chest pain. He went immediately to the cardiac catheterization laboratory where cardiac catheterization was performed. It revealed that the area that had been stented in his diagonal artery approximately the end of November had a focal area of restenosis or reocclusion. Dr. Reiner dilated that area with a balloon or angioplasty. The procedure took about an hour, and Vice President Cheney is now up in the cardiac care unit. Dr. Reiner is here, and we'd be glad to answer any further questions.
Will you translate what we just heard? Yeah,
sure. What we found when we repeated the angiogram was that the first diagonal coronary artery, in which we had placed a stent about 3 months ago, had a very focal area, a very discrete spot of re-narrowing. The stent actually looked very nice, with the exception of one spot at the origin of the stent, which was about 90% narrowed. And that is the spot that we redilated with a balloon. Yes, sir.
This is not just a standard non-emergency procedure. This is a fairly significant procedure.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't classify this as an emergency procedure. When patients re-narrow their coronary arteries, they redevelop chest pain. And, with the characteristic nature of his chest pain and the 2 episodes today, we thought that it was prudent to just proceed with angiography. So, in the setting, was this a scheduled procedure? No, it wasn't a scheduled procedure. But then again, I would classify this more as, less as emergent and more sort of as an urgent procedure.
But urgent, but is it a significant procedure to do an angioplasty?
Well, I mean, it's a significant procedure in that it is an invasive procedure. So every procedure that we classify as an invasive procedure, I would classify as significant. The procedure to redilate the artery was actually, very straightforward.
Why hadn't had this done at this time?
The question is, why do you have to have this redone at this time?
What if you hadn't had this done at this time?
Or what if you hadn't had this done at this time?
I think he would have continued to have chest pain, multiple episodes of chest pain.
How serious are his heart problems?
Well, the question is, how serious are his heart problems? The Vice President has had coronary disease for several decades now. Certainly for about 25 years. So he has chronic coronary artery disease. This is, what affects millions of people in this country.
Did he have a heart attack, sir?
Question is, did he have a heart attack or
The initial and only set of blood tests are normal. So As of now, there is no evidence of that, as of now.
How long will he be here, sir?
I'm sorry, say that again?
How long will he be here?
Hopefully just overnight.
How often is there stenosis or narrowing, re-narrowing with stents in?
About 20%. And, you know, it varies from study to study. We think that stenting itself, the initial stenting, reduces the risk of what we call restenosis or re-narrowing by about half, from about 40 to 50% for balloon angioplasty alone to around 20%. So, you know, we knew in November that there would be, you know, about a 20% likelihood of this, and this is something that we watch patients for. Yes, sir.
Any idea as to the cause of the re-narrowing?
You know, what we know is that when an artery is stented, you know, the stent is a foreign body, and the stent itself initiates a series of events, normal events, response sort of to injury events, which in about 20% of patients results in re-narrowing. It's a different process than atherosclerosis, than the atherosclerotic process, which occurs over a period of many decades. This is a specific response to injury from the stent.
Is there any chance that he suffered additional damage to the heart muscle itself because of this?
I think it's pretty. The question is there any chance that he's suffered additional damage to the heart muscle? I think it's pretty unlikely. His clinical syndrome was far different than that from November. In November, he had a rather strong and prolonged, for about an hour, episode of chest discomfort. You know, this was really a much milder and very brief, on the order of just literally 3 to 5 minutes of pain twice today, which was actually quite different in character than the discomfort he had in November.
Doctor, how far apart were these pains that he experienced during the day? When was the first one that was affected? And when were you contacted?
I was contacted by the vice president this morning. It's my understanding that on Saturday the vice president had a very brief, literally left chest twinge as he was getting off of a piece of exercise equipment, followed by a similar episode yesterday, and then one again this morning. So, right, followed by a subsequent one today. He had 2 episodes today.
Sir,
Yes.
how long do we expect him to be in the hospital, and how long would you...
Hold on. Let me just settle this. Let me just settle this.
Wait, hold on.
Let me be very
on the question.
let me be very specific about this. The vice president had a very subtle episode of chest discomfort as he finished his fairly rigorous exercise on Saturday. Again, another brief episode on Sunday afternoon, and then 2 episodes today. The first, early this morning, and the second in mid-afternoon, early to mid-afternoon.
Doctors either Saturday or Sunday after the experiences, either of those times?
He contacted me this morning.
But he did not contact you after the Saturday episode or the Sunday episode?
That's right. I think, and this really speaks to sometimes the insidious nature of the symptoms. You know, most people are sort of tuned into the classic symptoms of an elephant sitting on your chest, but quite often the symptoms are much more subtle. And the symptoms were subtle. I think what began to bother the vice president is that they recurred. And he called me first thing this morning.
Yes.
Yes.
We heard from the White House that an EKG was done today, and
Yes,
they
sir.
compared it to one last Thursday.
Yes.
How often is the vice president tested?
Well, last Thursday was a routine follow-up. Dr. Malikoff, myself, and Dr. Hoffman, one of the White House physicians, examined the vice president on Thursday in a routine follow-up after an angioplasty. It's been about 3 months, so we went over there to see him, and I don't know if an EKG has been done since his last follow-up visit with us in end of November, beginning of December, but that was the first EKG I've seen, the one on Thursday, and actually the first EKG that I've ordered.
Yes.
Yes.
Could you tell us how well the vice president is sticking to the exercise and diet that you recommended?
He's been terrific. We reviewed this on Thursday. The Vice President exercises about a half hour, around 4 to 5 times a week. He uses 2 pieces of exercise equipment, gets his heart rate up, gets a good beat of sweat going, and he's been on a rather, to say it mildly, rigorous diet, and he's been very successful at it. I mean, I think he's lost a significant amount of weight.
Sir, how long would you expect before he can resume a normal workload?
Well, what we tell all our patients after an uncomplicated procedure like this is we would routinely send them home the next day, and then often they return to work the following day. So we'll see how he feels in the morning. But
reoccur?
I'm sorry.
What are the risks of him re-injuring himself? How likely is it that he's going to have more pain?
This may reoccur, is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Well, I think it's hard to say. I would probably estimate that the risk of this narrowing returning is somewhere in the 40% range.
Doctor,
yes.
Describe the narrowing of the stent.
Yes.
Saying the stent partially, just basics here. Are you saying the stent partially collapsed in some way? We have to reinforce it now?
No, actually that specifically, the question is, did the stent collapse in any way? At the outset of this procedure, after identifying that the stent did contain this narrowing, Dr. Wasserman and I inserted what's called an intravascular ultrasound device, which is a very small ultrasound device that can be delivered into these arteries, and we can actually examine the stent from sort of the inside out. And what we found is that the stent was actually very well expanded and very well sized for that artery. And this is what enabled us to say that there was a very focal area of narrowing. The ultrasound really showed that just the origin, what we would call the ostium of the stent, was narrowed. But no, it would be exceedingly uncommon for these stents actually to collapse, almost unheard of.
What is that it might be a 40% range?
Was the Vice President on sedation during this? Is that what you asked?
Yes. These procedures are routinely done with some local anesthesia at the site that we put these catheters in at the top of the leg, and some mild sedation, which made the Vice President sleepy, and he dozed during the procedure.
For those patients that you know that have this chronic coronary artery disease, how serious would you say the Vice President is?
Well, I think it's sort of hard to create sort of a range of disease. The Vice President clearly has chronic coronary artery disease, and he's probably had it for many decades, though it was first discovered when he had his first heart attack in the 1970s. So, and this is what coronary artery disease has become. It's become a chronic disease affecting, millions of people in this country.
Yes.
The last time the Vice President was here, there was some confusion or misunderstanding about the part of the diagnosis.
Yes.
Can you assure us that even in a layman's term, he did not suffer even the smallest degree of a heart attack?
Well, the question is, can I assure you that he's not had a heart attack? We have, when we began the procedure on the Vice President, we obtained an initial set of blood tests, routine blood tests that we check, and we included in that cardiac enzymes, which are the markers of myocardial damage. So we have one set of enzymes, and those set of enzymes are normal. So as of now, I can assure you that he has not had myocardial damage, at least as evidenced by the first set of tests. And we will get subsequent tests. And is it possible for subsequent tests to be abnormal and to suggest myocardial damage? Absolutely. Do I think that's likely? Absolutely not. But we'll check subsequent blood tests.
It's important to realize his presentation is different this time. John, you want to mention that again?
Yeah. Again, he presented last time with really an acute, what we classify in sort of a wastebasket kind of way as an acute coronary syndrome, prolonged episode of chest pain with an EKG which evolved to show abnormal changes. This is a much different event. What he was demonstrating now was what we call restenosis of the artery, and which presents just like this, recurrence of angina. And so he was developing these very brief episodes of angina over the last day or so. Yes, ma'am.
When you say that you opened up that part that narrowed, do you leave something in there then, or how does that work? And if it has a 40% chance of recurrence, that's pretty high. Can this keep recurring and recurring over and over and over again? Or if this happens repeatedly to somebody, then do you have to do something else entirely?
Well, it's possible for the narrowing to come back, and I think I quoted around 40%. You know, there are studies that may show, you know, a little bit higher than that. Patients often will get a good and durable result from simple, sort of aggressive expansion of the stent. Hold on. Let me just finish this point. If the narrowing were to come back, you know, there are evolving technologies which are really only now becoming available to further prevent that, and that would include things like delivering intracoronary radiation therapy to the stent.
But can an artery tolerate you going back in, for example, repeatedly?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, yes.
On that question,
Yes.
the radiation question, you didn't use radiation last time and you didn't use it this time. Isn't it now sort of common to put a little radiation in there to prevent scarring?
No, it's not common at all to initially irradiate an artery when the stent is placed at the first setting. So that is not common. As for whether or not radiation therapy, you know, could be used now, you know, it's possible. There are some operators that will irradiate a stent with the first restenosis, which this is, the first restenosis. And then there are others that will wait for it to come back.
What was your reasoning for not using radiation?
Well, I think, you know, predominantly I think we can get a good result with balloon angioplasty, and often that's really all that it takes to achieve a durable result.
So this thing on that, this was definitely scarring and not something else. It was scar tissue that was in there in that 90%.
Yes.
Sir, this is the second time we've been here in a little over 3 months.
Yes, sir.
Can I ask you to comment on your belief about the likelihood of his being able to finish out his term vigorously as vice president?
Well, unfortunately, I can't. You know, I wish I could predict the future, but
Given what you see here.
no, I think there's a very high likelihood that he can finish out his term in his extremely vigorous capacity.
Sir,
Yes.
both times, the last time we were here and this time, it was heart pain, chest pain that initiated him to call.
Yes.
So in any of his checkups or anything like that, you don't discover these things. Does it take angina and chest pain for these things to become known to you, or is there a way to catch these things before they become acute and he comes to you?
Well, sometimes the way that patients do present, in fact, often the way that patients present with restenosis is with re-onset of pain. And, you know, we don't have a good tool to predict which patients will restenose and which patients won't restenose.
Can you give us some ideas to the Vice President's condition specifically, and then also what kinds of things is he experiencing right now? How is he feeling?
He's feeling a little groggy. We gave him some medication in the cath lab to sedate him, just to basically to relax him. And again, as I mentioned earlier, he dozed on and off throughout the procedure. So he'll feel a little groggy throughout the evening, and which the medication should rapidly go away, and by morning he should be fully alert and back to his baseline.
Yes. Is there a new figure for the percent of blood that his heart is pumping now? Last time I think it was about 40%.
We didn't repeat left ventricular angiography, which is the test where you put dye into the heart. We did not repeat that. Yes.
You said it was not an emergency procedure, but that it was urgent. When a patient like this feels some chest pain, how quickly do they have to get in there for a procedure? For example, the Vice President travels a lot, he's on airplanes. I mean, how quickly?
Well, fortunately, you know, this kind of occurrence after stent implantation, restenosis, often presents exactly like this. Not with myocardial infarction, not with heart attack, but rather with recurrence of chest pain, of limited chest pain. So, you know, fortunately, the symptoms usually are you know, quite self-limited. But, you know, the reemergence of these symptoms becomes then the marker that the artery has re-narrowed.
That's a rather aggressive
So they
approach.
could get it pretty quickly.
Well, you know, look, you know, cardiology has interventional cardiology has evolved, as Dr. Wassman was just saying, has evolved a very aggressive approach to patients with these chest pain syndromes. And, you know, it's very common for us now, not just in the vice president, but in our general practice, to take patients back to the cath lab very quickly when they redevelop symptoms. And, you know, quite frankly, if he were not the vice president and he called me 3 months after a stent placement and told me that he had a few episodes of chest pain and then, you know, 2 today, you know, I would ask him if he wanted to come in right now and we'll take a look and see what's going on. I mean, this is the way we aggressively but routinely take care of these patients.
Yes.
How
often are you monitoring the vice president since his last event here, and have you changed his medication in any way, and are you about to? What is the medication?
The only change we made to the vice president's medication was we increased the dose of his ACE inhibitor last week.
Why did you do that? Why did you do that?
Because I wanted him on a higher dose. I mean, that's the... No, I mean, there is very solid data for patients with coronary disease, like the vice president, that ACE inhibition improves outcomes. And, you know, as part of our, you know, routine assessment of his medication and status, I felt that I wanted him on a higher dose. So we increased the dose. Yes.
No longer on Plavix?
He is on Plavix.
Advised to do anything after the November episode that he failed to do that might have put him at a greater risk, such as not having a heart stress test done within a certain amount of time after that episode? Did he not take any steps that he was advised to take?
No, in fact, the answer to that question is no. In fact, the vice president has been exceedingly diligent at adhering to what we wanted him to do, including very regular exercise, and really a very strict adherence to a diet, which is hard for people to do, and he's been very good at it. You know, the vice president has virtually eliminated beef from his diet, which is hard to do. So the answer to the question is no. He actually has very nicely adhered to what we wanted him to do. We had not done it yet. You know, when you look at the time frame for doing a stress test after stent implantation, we're now sort of entering that time point. You know, 3 to 4 months after the procedure. So we're just getting there now. So we had not gotten to that. Yes.
You can talk to the point about when you believe the vice president can go back to his duties.
Well, let's see how he feels in the morning. I mean, I've had patients go back to work very quickly. Let's see how he feels in the morning. I would expect later in the week.
How do you officially list his condition?
Officially, I list his condition as stable.
Back in November, there was some confusion about whether his blood enzyme test indicated he had a heart attack or not, and this had to do, as I recall, with the standard by which a heart attack is measured using enzymes. Could you give us the numbers of his blood enzymes and tell us how far they are from either of those two standards?
We don't have. Both of us got them when he was in the cath lab. They showed them to us. They were stone cold normal, and I don't have those results. We can get them at another time, but we don't have them.
I mean, the only number that sticks in my head, the actual number, is the troponin, which was, I think, 0.05.
In the last episode of heart trouble that the vice president had, doctors were saying 90% of his artery had been blocked. Today you said 90% of the stent is blocked. Have we seen a complete reversal in terms of having it reopened last time now? It's back at 90% blockage?
No, not at all. You know, when the stent was implanted, there was a segment of the artery, which had a 90+% blockage in it, and that is what the stent covered, and what the stent the area in which the stent was placed. Now there is a very, very focal, literally 1 to 2 millimeter length spot of narrowing. So, which is encouraging. We sometimes see, when stents re-narrow, we sometimes see sort of a diffuse process of aggressive re-narrowing of the stent, and we did not see that.
Just for perspective, can you tell us how wide the stent was that you implanted in November?
The stent that we in fact, we know this with precision since we looked at this with ultrasound today. The stent that we implanted is 2.5 millimeters, and then we expanded that to close to 3 millimeters.
The length?
And the length of the stent was, I believe, 13 millimeters, something like that. So the stent in that coronary artery physically now is a little bit less than 3 millimeters in diameter by 13 millimeters in length, I believe.
Can you describe in layman's terms what a decent does?
At the press conference that you have been listening to and watching, we learned that the Vice President arrived at the hospital at around 3:30 this afternoon Eastern Time. A cardiac catheterization procedure was performed immediately thereafter, and the Vice President is now in the cardiac care unit. The doctor told us that he had found one spot in one artery needing a balloon procedure because that artery had narrowed. The doctor said that it was not an emergency procedure, that it was significant but also straightforward. The doctor said there had been no evidence that the Vice President had undergone a heart attack, and hopefully he would be in hospital just overnight and possibly back at work by the end of this week. He concluded, or was about to conclude the press conference, however, by saying that the Vice President does have chronic coronary disease. He also said it is highly likely that the Vice President could continue throughout his term and perform his term of office vigorously. We're joined now by Dr. Jay Maisel, a cardiologist in Washington, who is going to put this in perspective for us. Doctor, welcome to the program. Obviously, there is political and constitutional significance when a Vice President has a serious health problem like chronic coronary disease. Could you comment on the doctor's statement that the Vice President will be able to continue through his term and perform it vigorously?
I would certainly agree with Dr. Reiner's comments. It is very common for patients with chronic coronary artery disease to undergo such procedures, to require multiple interventions to keep the vessel open, but that has no impact on his ability to perform his daily duties and to return to the Vice Presidency.
He can do the job, but it is likely that he goes back with chest pains occasionally. That is the likelihood at this point, correct?
Well, Dr. Reiner did give us a statistic likelihood of that particular stent reclosing once again. He placed that figure at 40%, and that's within the range of what we would anticipate as seeing a problem with the stent. The range generally is between 20 to 40%. And it is possible that we might need numerous interventions to keep this vessel open, including interventions such as radiation therapies in the future. But I don't think that that would have any impact on his ability in the Vice Presidency.
Would you be able to tell us the statistical likelihood or probability of a full heart attack for the Vice President?
I think that would be impossible to predict with a fair degree of accuracy, and it depends entirely on his particular anatomy and the degree of the various blockages. I think what's important to note regarding the stent is the incidence of reoccurrence or restenosis is entirely dependent on the size of the stent and the length of the blockage it is deployed over. In his case, he mentioned that the stent size was between 2.5 to 3 millimeters, which is a very good size stent, and the length of the lesion was not very long, which would be which would offer a more favorable prognosis.
That is Dr. Jay Maisel, cardiologist in Washington. Doctor, we thank you very much for shedding some more light on this for us laymen. Doctor, thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Willow with more on this story. Willow?
Okay, Stuart, let's go to Major Garrett at the White House. President Bush has spoken to Vice President Cheney. Major, what do we know so far about that conversation?
Well, Willow, in the ongoing efforts here at the Bush White House to put the very best face on this situation, a statement was recently released by Press Secretary Ari Fleischer telling us that the president called Vice President Cheney tonight to wish him well. It was a 5-minute phone call during which the vice president told the president he was feeling fine and very much looked forward to getting back to work. As I said, the White House has tried to put the best face on this, but a couple of things from that press conference are certainly worth noting. Number one, the doctor described it as a significant procedure. He didn't say it was urgent, but he necessarily said it was significant that this procedure had to be taken place. And he said that during the procedure, the vice president was mildly sedated and that there was a local anesthetic applied. He also said there was no specific evidence yet that the vice president suffered another heart attack, but he said it was possible that enzyme tests they have yet to run may in fact reveal that, in fact, the Vice President had a heart attack, although the doctor said the chances of that were very, very slight. Willa?
Major Garrett at the White House, thanks for the update on that conversation. Coming up in the next half hour of Moneyline, we'll have the latest on the health of the Vice President, who, as you just heard, checked himself into a hospital. And we'll check out the economic impact of the March storm that is sweeping across the Northeast. It is a rough winter. Is it another blow to a struggling economy? Plus, Wall Street plays host to a tech turnaround. We'll check out whether this move is built to last, or is it just another false start?
For an industry that prides itself on being high-tech, a lot of online brokers are surprisingly hands-on. Your order to buy or sell a stock simply gets handed from one middleman to the next. Which means, by the time your order's confirmed, you may wish it wasn't. Daytech Online, built to trade.
1844. Searching for a simpler life, philosopher Henry David Thoreau retreats to the woods of Massachusetts. Of course, Thoreau didn't have a family to support, wasn't in the 39% tax bracket, or concerned with balancing his portfolio. And he didn't have Merrill Lynch Unlimited Advantage, where your personal financial consultant will help you plan, invest, and bank all for a simple fee. A simple fee, a simpler life. Beats sleeping in the woods, doesn't it?
Tonight on Wolf Blitzer Reports, bullets fly at a high school in suburban San Diego. Could this tragedy have been prevented? Plus, Dick Cheney hospitalized. We'll have a live report on Wolf Blitzer Reports tonight, 8 Eastern on CNN.
Daytech's advanced routing technology automatically directs your order in an effort to get you the best available price. Daytech Online, built to trade.
The Moneyline News Hour continues. Here again, Willow Bay in Los Angeles and Stuart Barney
In tonight's headlines, Wall Street puts on a winning session as investors look for bargains in the beaten-down tech sector. But today's move hardly makes a dent in the Nasdaq's bear run nearly 1 year after the index hit a record high. The Nasdaq is down 58%. We'll ask someone who called the market right, what is next? Plus, hardly the sign of a down market, the IPO market heats up. We'll ask IPO watcher David Menlo why so many companies want to issue stock right now.
But first, more on the winter blast hitting the Northeast. Schools today were closed, businesses shut down early, and airline flights were cancelled. That as a severe winter storm began to dump heavy snow and freezing rain all across the region. The full fury is expected to be felt overnight and into Tuesday. The weather nationwide has been so bad this season that it may be putting the economy in jeopardy. It has also made it hard to assess just how strong or weak the economy really is. For more on all of that, let's go to Peter Viles. Peter.
Stuart, New York tonight is bracing for a punch, and so far, it's a little blowy out here, but so far that punch has not yet come. That said, this winter has delivered so much disruptive weather that it is becoming a little bit hard sometimes for economists to track the underlying trends in this economy.
Even before it arrived, the storm caused flight cancellations at New York airports, sent residents throughout the Northeast out to stockpile groceries and supplies, and put economists on notice that another batch of economic statistics may be skewed by Mother Nature. Big storms don't always slow the economy down. Sometimes they even add to economic activity. But this winter volatile weather has wreaked havoc with some economic indicators. It began in November and December, both unusually cold. Consumers stayed home, painting a picture of an economy screeching to a halt when in fact weather was playing a major role.
I think it really exacerbated our view of a slowdown, particularly in the fourth quarter. And then once conditions got a little more mild in January, we saw a lot of activity, especially in consumer spending, come back. A lot of auto sales. You couldn't go out and test drive an auto in this kind of snowy weather.
The numbers bear that out. Auto sales fell sharply in December, then bounced back in January and February. In explaining why the economy slowed so fast, stock market analyst Abby Joseph Cohen cited, quote, special factors that included the coldest November-December in 105 years, following the warmest November-December, discouraging some economic activity.
And even the man investors turn to for guidance is talking about the weather.
The exceptional degree of slowing so evident toward the end of last year, perhaps in part the consequence of adverse weather, seemed less evident in January and February.
The disruptions continue. The latest storms may hurt spring fashion sales. J.P. Morgan reports that mall traffic has been slowed by unseasonable weather. Storms like the one bearing down on New York City tonight sometimes actually add to economic activity. There is last-minute spending on supplies and groceries. There is also spending after the storm passes through to clean up whatever damage and repair whatever damage the storm leaves behind. Willow?
Peter, you may have a lot of digging out ahead. Peter Viles, thanks. Well, it's not just bad in the east here on the west coast. We are getting hit by a severe storm system as well. A Pacific storm is battering the state with heavy winds, toppling trees, and causing scattered power outages. Heavy rain is sparking concern over flooding.
All right, the Pacific storm and the nor'easter are just the latest in a string of storms that have added up to one tough winter. Joining us now, the only full-time meteorologist employed by a Wall Street firm, John Davis of Salomon Smith Barney. John, I hate to be mercenary, but in financial terms, where is the worst weather right now?
Well, really, the worst weather right now is in the northeast quadrant of the country, and of course is around that big storm system off the northeast coast, and that will continue to be the feature tonight, tomorrow, and even into the early portion of Wednesday.
But in the northeast, isn't economic activity just postponed? We pick up again with a vengeance when the storm is gone. We don't really lose anything economically.
Well, really, from a standpoint of productive activity here, you simply lose productive activity. All the schools and businesses that are closed for a couple of days across the region, the transportation problems here, both on the rails, air travel, road transportation, as well as shipping transportation across that region. All of those losses of productivity are simply lost in the overall output until the storm passes, and those things can never be regained.
John, I put it to you that the rain, all that rain in Southern California, because of the need to generate hydroelectric capacity, surely that rain is good news long-term for the economy there, isn't it?
Well, that is one beneficial aspect, really specifically for California as well as the Pacific Northwest. Keep in mind, however, that the last couple of months of 2000 were exceptionally dry across that area of the far west, and they can really never get back to normal across those locales. They're making up a bit, but they can never get back to normal.
That is John Davis, meteorologist at Salomon Smith Barney. Thanks for being with us, John.
My pleasure.
Now let's go to Willow in rainy Southern Cal. Willow.
Right. Well, Stuart, on Wall Street, it kicked off the week on a positive note as investors looked past some ongoing profit concerns to send the markets to a recovery driven by solid gains in tech shares. Blue chips headed higher from the start and closed near session highs, up nearly 96 points to 10,562. Volume was light at 929 million shares. A similar story for the NASDAQ, which rose 25 to 2142. Nearly 1.5 billion shares changed hands. Checking out some of the major movers, IBM gained more than 2.5. Intel up just more than 1. Ciena rose nearly 3 3/4. Amazon picked up 2 5/8, following a report that the online retailer was talking to Walmart about a strategic alliance. But Veritas lost nearly 4 on fears that it would warn about profits after the bell. The shares recovered somewhat after the bell when Veritas said it was sticking with its guidance. In tonight's Moneyline Focus, assessing the damage a year later. It was a year ago this week that the NASDAQ hit its record high. And every night this week, we're looking at just how far we have fallen since then and where we're going now. It has become clear the NASDAQ crash is not just a market event, but is having a serious impact on the economy. The sharp and sudden slowdown has become the critical issue consuming Wall Street, and it's inspiring some to cook up an alphabet soup of theories to explain just how it may play out. Terry Keenan goes behind the numbers to explain, or Terry, should we say behind the letters?
Yes. Well, Willow, with an increasing number of economists now using the R word, recession, to describe the state of the U.S. economy, talk has turned to the shape and scope of the slowdown, and with it an entire alphabet of characters to describe the economic landscape before us. At the start of the year, most observers, including Alan Greenspan, were looking for a V-shaped recovery, a quick snapback after a swift slowdown. But as the NASDAQ and consumer confidence started to wane in February, an increasing chorus of economists turned to the letter U to denote what might be a more protracted downturn lasting into the second half of this year. In fact, U has become the letter of choice of late, with economists David Jones, Barton Biggs, and Bill Dudley at Goldman Sachs each using it to describe the recession in recent weeks. But now some new letters to describe an economy on the edge. As nearly every major tech firm reported an order crunch in the first quarter, several economists, including Stephen Roach, the highly respected economist at Morgan Stanley Dean Witter, are now warning of an L-shaped recession. That's one that could take more than a year to play out. Now, if that sounds bad, it would not be unusual. Looking back to the start of the last century, there have been 20 recessions, lasting on average more than a year and occurring once every 4 years. Given the fact that it has now been 10 years since the last U.S. recession, one economist says this downturn might take its name from our president.
I like W, and I mean that, well, it's a sign of the times, too, isn't it? But I think what I would try to convey with that is that the economy in the last few years has been remarkably stable. And in fact, for the last 20 years, you've only had 2 business cycles. Very long business expansions, uninterrupted in the 80s, again in the 90s. I think we're in for a period that's much more cyclical.
In fact, Sass believes the next 5 years will be marked by 6 to 9 month periods of retrenchment, followed by 12 to 18 month periods of expansion. Fortunately, no one is publicly talking about an I-shaped recession. That's one that goes straight down, but there still are 20 letters left in the alphabet to choose from. Stuart?
Good one. Terry Keener at the big board. Thanks very much, Terry. Well, the NASDAQ hit its record on March 10th of 2000. That night on Moneyline, I got the outlook on just where the NASDAQ was headed from Wharton finance professor Jeremy Siegel. Listen to this. Are you flat out forecasting a huge decline in tech stocks in the very near future?
I think a big decline is very possible. We all know in the last 5 months we've doubled the NASDAQ, and I've looked at earnings projections, and I don't see very much change from where it was 5 months ago. So I'm wondering where all this change in valuation is coming from, and it can disappear as easily as it came.
Got that right. Since then, the NASDAQ has lost a colossal 2,900 points, 58%, and Professor Siegel joins us now from Philadelphia. Professor, welcome back.
Good evening.
Today, I saw that Cisco, priced at $22 a share, is valued at 54 times its earnings. Now, is a PE of 54 unsustainable long-term?
We've seen companies that deserve PEs of 40s and 50s. Last year, when we saw these companies at 100 price-earnings ratio, that had never been seen before. I can live with 40 and 50. In fact, I looked at those big-cap tech stocks, and many of them are in their 30s and 40s.
Are you now telling us, then, that Jeremy Siegel sees a bottom for the NASDAQ fairly soon?
I wish I could be so lucky as to be able to pinpoint the bottom for you. Bear markets don't turn around on a dime. There's got to be a lot of basing. There's a lot of uncertainty. PE of the S&P tech sector is 28 at the present time, and certainly that is much lower than the 70 that it was last March.
Yes, but Professor, let me jump in, because I was always told that in a bull market, if you had a PE of 20, 22, 23, 24, that was getting pretty rich. You're saying that the tech sector on the S&P 500 is still at 28, so it's got to come down some more, correct?
Well, it doesn't have to go down to the average, because I still think there is better than average growth in this tech sector. I don't think they should be priced like General Motors or Ford or some of those other cyclical companies. I would give them a higher PE, and I would say 5 or 10 points above the low 20s or the high teens is certainly a reasonable level for these stocks.
We've had 2 aggressive rate cuts from the Federal Reserve, no real reaction, certainly in the NASDAQ and not much in the Dow. What's happening there?
Too much hope, too much belief that it is a knee-jerk reaction. If the Fed lowers interest rates, it's a slam dunk. The market is going up. We have to remember that we've started from the highest PE ratio ever when the Fed has started lowering rates. Usually the market has been smashed beforehand. We're starting from a rich level. People got too optimistic, and I think when too many people are piling on saying it's going to go up, what happened is most often the course that it follows.
All right, Professor Jeremy Siegel, always a pleasure, and we thank you very much for being with us again with your wisdom. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
As a program note, we will be watching the NASDAQ and what's happened to it recently throughout this week. Now let's go to Willow.
Stuart, coming up, the stormy weather delivers more than just rain and snow. We'll have all the details next.
Moneyline Focus is brought to you by Brobeck, Flager, and Harrison. Brobeck, the law firm, when your future is at stake. Log on to cnnfn.com/Moneyline for more bios and background on industry moneymakers.
When your future is at stake.
Over 400 M&A engagements.
Last 2 years. Tens of billions of dollars.
Looking to merge or acquire?
Brobeck, the law firm, when your future is at stake.
Look around out there. The world is full of invention. At Exelon, we think it's time for utility companies to catch up. It's time to do not just energy and infrastructure, but ideas. Okay, we'll go first. Exelon, welcome change.
They both worked their way up the ladder. Same executive perks, same six-figure salaries. So why does one look forward to early retirement, while the other looks forward to the 15th and the 31st? Some people already know our financial representatives excel at a lot more than life insurance. Northwestern Mutual Financial Network. Are you there yet?
I told my father I wanted to grow up to be a teacher. Wouldn't you rather be a doctor? He said. It's a noble profession and you could become wealthy. That may be true, I said. But without teachers, where would doctors come from?
Tonight's Sectors Report is brought to you by Fidelity Investments. We can help you see yourself succeeding.
In tonight's sector report, a banner day for oil. Stormy weather on the East Coast, coupled with talks of more cuts from OPEC, pushed prices up nearly $1 in early trading. By the close in New York, light sweet crude was up 76 cents to $28.60, the biggest move to the upside in nearly 1 month. Now, it has been a bumpy year, though, for oil. After spiking in late January, it's off more than 10%. Stocks in the sector, though, getting a boost today. Chevron, Exxon, Mobil, and Texaco all moving to the upside. Oil service plays Baker Hughes adding on more than 1, and Schlumberger gaining 83 cents. A mixed bag for those stocks overall this year. Chevron and Texaco are higher, while rival ExxonMobil has slipped. Baker Hughes in positive territory as well. The biggest loser of the bunch so far in 2001, Schlumberger. It is down more than 17%. Moneyline will be right back.
Sectors Report is brought to you by Fidelity Investments. Fidelity, all the expertise, service, and technology to help you see yourself succeeding. Log on to cnnfn.com/markets for the latest on all the stock sectors.
Excuse me, my cab.
I'm sorry.
Can we share a cab?
Why not?
You're with Fidelity.
That's right.
Let me ask you something. I still have a 401k from a job that I had 3 jobs ago. Can I move that?
Oh, most of the time, sure. It's called a rollover.
Really?
We can do all the paperwork, and you just sign and roll it into an IRA, and you can buy stocks or mutual funds, whatever you're comfortable with.
And I'd be in control of it?
Sure.
Get my life down to 1 sheet of paper.
To invest, call, click, or visit Fidelity.
Technology has the power to fundamentally change the way your company does business. But only when you fully understand its true potential.
Do you believe in flying fish and whistling frogs? Did you ever take a stroll through time? Or measure a day by a heartbeat instead of a clock? When was the the last time you celebrated absolutely nothing but the pure joy of being alive? Barbados. Barbados, just beyond your imagination.
The Internet helps you reach millions of customers around the globe. But who's keeping you in touch with the Internet?
Fujitsu, the possibilities are infinite.
This week is a feast after famine for initial public offerings. Only 13 companies have managed to go public this year compared to the 70 IPOs in the first 2 months of 2000. But 8 companies are on the IPO docket for this week, arguably a bullish sign for the market. The list includes LoudCloud, Seattle Genetics, Stelmar Shipping, ISS Healthcare, and medical manufacturer UTI. Here to look at some of them, David Menlo of IPO Financial. David, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you.
It seems like an odd time in the market to have this flurry of IPOs. Why are we seeing them now, and what's it saying about the market?
We had such a devastating year for the year 2000 after the Internet unwound itself. And really the biggest problem that we have this year is regaining the confidence that we had in previous years. The difference also is that we were dealing with a market that was steeped in perception. Now it is dealing with reality. So that's quite a welcome change for many people.
But so what do you think this market holds for these IPOs? It's quite a varied group.
It's going to be a market that is characterized as sober. We are not going to see these 80 or 90 or even maybe 20-point higher openings for the stocks for quite some time. This is a market that has to reestablish itself and really has to make a new footprint in the sand.
One of the names on the list is LoudCloud, Mark Andreessen's tech startup. Obviously, he's a star name in the tech world, but there are plenty of risky tech companies out there. Why should investors buy this IPO?
I think they should be buying this very cautiously because this is still about an Internet infrastructure play. The market is not really ready to embrace this entirely, but Mark Andreessen, the co-founder of Netscape from its 1995 IPO, is really a lightning rod and a magnet for business opportunities.
All right, show some caution, as you say. David Menlo, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Stuart?
All right, Willow, up next, ahead of the curve, you're watching Moneyline.
Moneyline's Ahead of the Curve is brought to you by Daytech Online, the online broker that's built to trade.
For an industry that prides itself on being high-tech, a lot of online brokers are surprisingly hands-on. Your order to buy or sell a stock simply gets handed from one middleman to the next. Which means, by the time your order's confirmed, you may wish it wasn't. Daytech Online, built to trade.
Tonight on The Point, accused double agent Robert Hansen has his day in court. How much did he really know about the tunnel under the Soviet embassy in Washington? Greta Van Susteren gets to the point and talks with a friend of the now infamous spy. Tonight, 8:30 Eastern on CNN.
Take a look at what could move those markets tomorrow. Watch for earnings from retail giants Target and Kmart. And keep an eye out for the latest economic numbers, plenty to be released. Revised fourth quarter productivity numbers expected to show a 2% growth rate, and that will be slightly lower than initial numbers. Factory orders for January also due out, and watch for a special birthday celebration. Tomorrow, Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan turns 75.
That is Moneyline for this Monday. I'm Willow Bay in Los Angeles.
And I'm Stuart Varney. Good night from New York. Crossfire's next. Here's Bill Press. Bill.
Stuart and Willow, thank you. After experiencing chest pains earlier today, Vice President Dick Cheney checked into the hospital where doctors performed what they call a non-emergency but still urgent procedure to see if he had suffered any heart damage. This after his 4th heart attack just last November. We get the latest word on Mr. Cheney and debate the day's other political news. Next on Crossfire.
Closed captioning for this program has been provided by Verizon Communications.
Tonight on Wolf Blitzer Reports, bullets fly at a high school in suburban San Diego. Plus, Dick Cheney hospitalized. We'll have a live report tonight, 8 Eastern.
Premier Lincoln Mercury is driven to excellence, and it shows. Right now, we're offering special lease incentives on Lincoln Navigator, the most luxurious way to travel anywhere. Or get interest rates as low as 2.9%. And free scheduled maintenance for 3 years or 36,000 miles on any Lincoln, Navigator, Town Car, LS. And at Premier, our selection is tremendous.
Come and find out why. At Premier Auto Group, we are driven to excellence.
Premier Lincoln Mercury on Canyon Road in Beaverton.
Now is the time to save hundreds of dollars, only at Mattress World. Rollbacks from the factories have allowed us to slash prices on some of our best-selling mattresses. We only sell top brands: Sealy, Posturepedic, Correct Comfort, and even Crown Jewel. Hurry in, some of these items are limited to stock on hand. It's not too late to sleep like a baby. Mattress World off I-205, exit 12, 8 blocks north of Clackamas Fred Meyer, where low overhead means low prices.
This is CNN.
I'm Bill Himmer, live at the CNN Center in Atlanta. Crossfire is coming up next, but first I want to update you on the latest stories today. Vice President Dick Cheney is in a Washington hospital tonight. Doctors performed an angioplasty today to clear a partially blocked artery to his heart. Cheney checked himself in after experiencing, quote, chest discomfort. Crossfire, the latest on Dick Cheney's condition, coming up shortly here. Authorities also say a 15-year-old boy will be charged as an adult after today's high school shooting in suburban San Diego. 2 students were killed, 13 others were injured today. Students say the suspect was frequently picked on at school. They also say he had been threatening an attack over the weekend, but the students thought he was only joking about that matter. In the meantime, also watching the weather conditions. Another story, we're watching a powerful nor'easter threatening the East Coast, and Karen McGinnis is watching that and joins us now for an update. Karen, good evening to you.
Hey, Bill, yes, this storm system, if you were wondering what happened, where's the big punch with this system? Well, in fact, it looks like overnight tonight, we're watching this storm wind up just to the south of Long Island. As this area of low pressure deepens, there's also an upper level system and a secondary upper level system that across